The sea was vast. It burned with such fury that its depths and distances were beyond human sight, and lapped at the furthest shores of human comprehension. Its true brightness could never be known by men, for no eyes could survive the unrestrained light of the blood of a dying star. A mere glimpse could incinerate. Thus man sailed the Edelweiss in ships whose thickened hulls were plated with ceramic heat shielding and lined with vanes that pulsed coolant from bow to stern, whose mighty engine cores generated intense magnetic fields to ward against radiation, whose portholes were made of an arcane metamaterial, dense with filaments that filtered all but a tiny percentage of Sol's merciless glare. Telescopes were blinded by the nebulous formations of the raging fire, all but useless beyond a short distance. Thermography was used to gauge the weather, to chart the great currents and the emergence of massive storms, yet all but the largest of vessels and structures were veiled by their own reflected heat. Only radioscopic arrays could grant sight of distant things, but the howling radio emissions of the Edelweiss's depths blanketed the sea with a writhing, fizzing, flickering chaos, and could drive a man insane, or so the mariners claimed. So it was that even something the size of a city district, orbiting the Edelweiss at high speed, could remain hidden for centuries, rarely detected by even the most powerful radio telescopes, and usually misidentified as naught but slag. There were stories of such antiquities ploughing through the trade lanes on orbits so eccentric they were not to be encountered again for 100 years or more, accelerating down the gravitational incline on slingshot trajectories, annihilating anything caught in their path, then disappearing beyond the rim, whence no living crew returned. And after 1,000 years, in spite of mankind's unbridled curiosity and insatiable greed, the undiscovered mysteries, treasures, and horrors which circled the site of the Earth's demise were seemingly innumerable. Tomb ship. Mausoleum. Some of them were haunted wrecks from across the ages, the desolate corpses of titans, casualties of old wars or long-forgotten accidents. Others were deliberately cast adrift, vessels sacrificed to the sea, carrying the dead into the afterlife. And then there was this. Cassandra had read much of the greater tomb ships, heard much long before she had ever gone to sea. Stories circulated through the cities and towns of the Midwhelm, drunken sailors and old explorers telling their tales of ancient treasures and dangers, with novelists and playwrights regularly exploiting such an abundant resource. But in all her time at sea thus far, in spite of her searching, she'd never seen such a thing. At first, as the huge shadow emerged from the veil of fire, they thought it was a lost colony, a doomed habitat, either victim of a collision or intentionally set on its endless voyage in the wake of a plague outbreak. Then they saw the shadow in greater detail. The pock-marked bow, sculpted black rock riddled with centuries of impacts, the angular stern with its huge engines of arcane design still largely intact. The hull was born of the remnants of one of Sol's holy children, rock, slag from one of the planets cracked and scorched by the end of the world, a ship sculpted, not built, and if their information proved correct, they would find this ship had no crew, only passengers. To thermal imaging it was impenetrable. It could have been a solid rocky mass, for all its undulating hues revealed. To radioscopics it was all but invisible. The guide's signal barely interacted with it, leaving naught but a faint outline in the white noise. To the naked eye it was unsettling. To Cassandra it seemed almost to be staring back at them, unnaturally patient and impossibly ancient. Yet it was received with unreserved enthusiasm by the rest of the team. "At last," came the announcement over the intercom, "we have found it. Check all equipment and ready yourselves to make... no, to rediscover history." 2 months at sea. They'd prepared for the long haul. A skeleton crew and a small expedition team. In addition to a well-stocked cargo bay, half the crew quarters were packed full of supplies. They had enough to last another month if they did without a few luxuries, but then they'd be quite literally eating into their expedition time. It was lucky they found it when they did. It was moving fast, faster than the estimates suggested. They'd been forced to spend a whole day accelerating to match its speed, a whole day of feeling the world tug you backwards, of watching your belongings accumulate on the aft wall of every compartment, of having to climb up the corridors, feet on the frames of each doorway, the feeling of horizontal vertigo, a whole day of motion sickness and short tempers. "Extend the cowl," said the captain, the exchange of orders chattering away over the intercom as the expedition sidled up to the black rock. Shadow flooded every starboard compartment as the portholes went dark. Sol's glorious light blotted out as if it had never existed. Cowl extended, adapting to the aperture. There was a muffled clang, a deep rumble, a muted whirring and whining from further along the ship. And secured. Port locks confirmed. Stillness. Stillness the likes of which she hadn't felt since the city. The stillness of being bound to some great mass, the stability of a planet, or at least a small piece of one. All around, the ship ticked and clicked and creaked as its engine core settled into an idle state. Coolant pump active, temperatures dropping. "Would you look at that?" whispered Lyle. He pulled himself towards the porthole and placed a hand upon it. Blackness lay beyond, and the compartment was now lit by little more than the faint glow of a solitary control panel. Cassandra strained to see anything in the dark. Look at what? Something nobody has touched in centuries. It's been out here all this time, and nobody has even set eyes upon it. "Oh, a few people certainly have," rumbled Vorhaelig in his lilting Farron accent. "And 'twas the last thing they ever saw. You read the corporate encounter reports and nav hazard warnings. This thing sunk at least 10 ships in the past 50 years alone, and those are just the documented losses. Have you no imagination, Carl? Just take a moment to—" "I got a plentiful imagination. What I'm imagining is that we'll be saving a lot of lives when we're done prattling around in there. Those engines sure looked intact to me. If we can wake this thing up, blast it out past the rim—" "Sturdivant said we'd be trying to stabilize its orbit." "Old Sturdy says a lot of things, but what it all boils down to is, if we can't stabilize it before it reaches the Anshan border in 2 months' time, we blast it out past the rim. And if we can't blast it out past the rim, we just straight up blast it. You wise men seem to forget that our little trip out here was funded on the basis that whether you find anything of academic value or not, the problem gets fixed. I am aware of the conditions of our funding, thank you very much." "Yeah, well, we'll see how long that awareness lasts before you go all glassy-eyed and start walking into traps again." Robert Lyle let out an exasperated sigh. Though his face was lost in shadow, Cassandra could imagine the man's cheeks turning red. Vorhaelig seemed to be very good at unraveling people. "That happened one time." "One too many, you ask me. Or did you happen to find me a replacement ear finger back at the megalith?" Silhouetted before the control panel, Vorhaelig waggled his left hand at Lyle. "You're going to hold that pinky over me until the day I die, aren't you?" "Well, no, I can't. It's missing." Cassandra couldn't help but laugh at them. "Oh, and what are you laughing at, little Miss Steorosight? You're half as bad as him, coming out here to see things. Bloody fool, head all full of fantasy. Bet you drew stars on your ceiling back home, eh?" "No," she lied. "Well, take my word for it. You can sail out here close to the rim as you like, long as you like. You'll never see the stars. And even if you did, it'd be the last thing you ever saw. Nobody comes back from out there. Not alive, at least." "Don't mind him," said Lyle. "He always gets like this when we arrive." "Oh, I do I?" "Yes, you do. Some sort of stress coping mechanism." Vorhaelig sniffed. "Yeah, well, if I'm stressed, it's only 'cause I gotta look after a bunch of dolish bloody children who want to poke every dangerous old thing the air world has to offer. Oh, what's this? A room full of skeletons and scorch marks? I shall assume it was a cooking accident and go lang-shanking right in. Pfft. You lot pay me to go first, then keep trying to push past me." The intercom buzzed loudly, lost somewhere in the darkened compartment. "Carl?" Vorhaelig shoved off from the wall. "I'm here. Temperature and pressure readings are in the green, but the atmosphere looks a bit stale. You may want the suits." "Right, I'm on my way." They didn't need to use the breaching rig or any of the drills. The docking port was still viable and responsive. The great doors didn't even squeak when they were opened. No alarms rang out. There was no gunfire, no hissing of fire suppressant being pumped into the chamber with intent to suffocate intruders. Vorhaelig went first, as was his role in all this. The rest of the team watched him from the quarterdeck, crowding around the monitors relaying images from the airlock cameras. He floated alone, shoving off from the wall, and promptly fell onto hands and knees as he crossed the threshold, apparently falling under the influence of artificial gravity. The speakers crackled, a muffled grunt of annoyance and exertion. "Are you all right in there, Mr. Forhalig?" inquired Philip Sturdivant, renowned archaeologist and expedition leader, his white brows furrowed, his wrinkled old face creased all the more with genuine concern. "Yeah, it's not as heavy as it looks," Forhalig replied, rising to his feet and bellowing that his voice might be heard by the airlock intercom. Waving his hands around experimentally, he added, "Feels like maybe 75% lens standard, maybe a bit less. You'll want to brace yourselves." "Understood. Do you see any immediate threats?" Forhalig's suited form trudged forward into an open space that was dark and glittering like starlight. That was 4 days ago. Not that Cassandra could distinguish between them. In this place, time didn't seem to move at all. Unlike the city, there was no cycle of day and night here, no throbbing rhythm of commerce and life, just the silence, heavy as the stone lids of the sarcophagi. It messed with your head, that silence. She could see it in all of them, in the way they talked, the way they moved. The scholars had been so keen to explore the place at first, buzzing with excitement, pushing past one another at every opportunity. But now every conversation was a truncated murmur, as few words exchanged as possible, lest the sound of a single syllable carry through the emptiness like a stone thrown into glassy waters. Nobody rushed, lest their footsteps or the mere rustling of their clothing draw attention. There was nothing to attend, nothing to notice their presence. The place had no security measures, no malevolent software to be awakened by their clumsy intrusion. Yet that heavy silence felt watchful, almost baleful. The wheels of the cart squeaked softly as she turned a corner and reached the antechamber, the docking port through which they had arrived. The sound escaped into the passage behind and echoed into the distance, as if passed on in whispers by the sculpted black angels that lined the walls. She cringed, and made a mental note to oil the wheels yet again. The old camp was still largely intact, even though the expedition had progressed so much deeper into the place that coming back here was impractical. And they did. Every night some of the team members came back here just to sleep, as far away from the rest of it as possible. Their bedding and stray clothing was strewn across the glassy black tiles, and though the rest of the place was pristine, their own dirt had accumulated, a veil of dust shifting back and forth over the floor, lifted by an unfelt breeze, motes of the stuff burning brightly in shafts of golden twilight. There were a lot of unfelt breezes here. A lot of shivers down the spine, cloth billowing in still air, cigarette smoke wafting in odd directions. None of them wanted to talk about it. The engineers dismissed everything as anomalous interactions between the atmosphere and the magnetic structures of the something-something technical, while the archaeologists and historians simply pretended that they hadn't noticed anything odd, for they were too rational to worry about the G word. Ghosts, that is. Cassandra wasn't afraid to acknowledge it. Mankind could end the world in fire, it could sail a burning sea on threads of twisted plasma and fend off the fury of Sol itself with technological ingenuity. Mankind could dodge fate time and time again and survive against all odds, but the cold, prickly feeling of never quite being alone in an empty room, the ancient dread of things unseen, unknown, that was here to stay. She tried her best to ignore it. She checked the list again and looked out across the crates and heaps of equipment awaiting relocation to the second camp. Everything was still piled up against the outer wall of the antechamber, huddled around the airlock door as if ready to flee at the first sign of trouble. Not that they could. Not anymore. Outside, through flawless arches of black rock, through 2 meters of solid pseudo-diamond, the burning sea raged impotently, distantly, its dazzling glare filtered and diminished into murky embers, its great currents and raging storms reduced to a nebulous veil of apparent serenity, vast and languid. There was no ship on the other side of that airlock, nowhere to run to, no way to leave this place. The decision had been unanimous, at least among the academics. When preliminary exploration revealed the true scale of the task at hand, the sheer significance of this find, and a quick inventory and headcount revealed the limits of the resources at their disposal, it was decided that their ship would set sail without them, on a course for a nearby border station. There, additional supplies and equipment would be procured, and laborers hired. The ship would return in 2 weeks. They'd been excited at first. To the archaeologists and historians, it was like one big sleepover in a haunted house. But the reality of living in a place meant for the dead soon hit them hard. The logistics of it all, the unpleasant practicalities. There were no facilities, no showers, no toilets, no place to wash their clothes. They had a variety of devices to aid them, machines that could accumulate moisture from the air or reclaim it from other places, that sort of thing. They'd brought an entire kitchen's worth of cooking utensils and a variety of portable stoves with a variety of fuel sources, but this place was meant for the dead, not the living. Everywhere you went there was naught but hard black rock, cold and unyielding, and completely unforgiving of aching joints. There was nowhere to sit, nowhere to unwind, free from the blank, unblinking stares of the statues and of the legion of figures depicted in bas relief. Someone had tried draping their clothes over the heads of the angels in the antechamber. It didn't work. Beneath the shirts and trousers you could still see the shape of the heads, and they seemed to stare all the harder. And with the black rock concealed, and the occasional breeze lifting the material, you could easily begin to imagine that they were moving. Cassandra shivered and hauled a couple of boxes onto the cart, then promptly retreated along the passage, trying very hard not to walk so briskly as to be technically running. Once you started running, it was very hard to stop, and there was nowhere to run to. It was hollow, this place. That was the first great discovery. The passage leading from the antechamber suddenly opened up on one side, a broad, arched doorway, flanked by robed figures, heads bowed in prayer. One word was etched into the arch in an ancient dialect: sleep. Through the doorway there were steps leading down, leading out into the hollow heart of the tomb ship, and revealing its nature as not a ship at all, nor even a great mausoleum or former colony, but a city of the dead. Sunlight poured through a massive domed roof, coloured and patterned pseudo-diamond, laying a blanket of tessellated geometric forms upon the structures below. And of those structures there were many. Entire streets encircled a deep space down in the center of the city, great columns and statues, ornate porticos and twirling spires, all cut from the glassy black rock, without seams, without joins, without supports. The entire necropolis was one flawless sculpture, one uninterrupted piece, from its deep central pit up around its terraces to the great dome above, as if no earthly tools had carved this place, as if it had been willed into existence by the mind of a great artist, shaped by sheer imagination.